Good morning, everyone. This is the first video for the digital modeling, 3D modeling course, and we're going to jump right into Blender here in the first lesson. Blender's a free 3D modeling software package that you can grab online. It's actually free and open source, and you can run it on Mac or PC or Linux. And I think the current version, I'm not sure what the current version is right now. I'm using 3.6, but it's close enough to what you'll probably be using. And then I guess I probably should upgrade for future videos, but for now, this will do. We're just going to cover the very basics. Sometimes 3D modeling can be kind of intimidating, especially if you are a pure beginner. And this lesson here, I'm assuming no prior experience in Blender or any other 3D modeling software packages. So we're going to start with some basic tools and concepts that I like to share that I feel like does a good job of getting people up from nothing to being able to make stuff pretty quickly. And then once you're comfortable with those tools, you can sort of graduate to using more complicated tools or seeking out other learning resources. And one of the good things about Blender, besides being free and just the overall really solid piece of software, well-rounded piece of software, is it has a very robust learning community. So you'll be able to find all kinds of tutorials and like add-ons and other things people have made for Blender that can help you like really get to a high level pretty quick. So here, let's go ahead and get started with some of the basics to get everything going. So you can be on your way to being a modeler for games or animation or whatever you want to do. I have a new file open, and when you open Blender for the first time, it's going to ask you some questions about how you want to interact with it. I'm just using the default settings for that, and then this is a general file. And a general file is laid out like this. So once you get to those couple steps, you should see what I'm seeing right now. And by default, Blender will give you a cube, a lamp, and a camera. So I'm going to start just by clicking on the lamp and delete, and then the camera and delete, and I'll leave the cube for the lesson. So the first thing, actually, if you click and then hit the delete, that's how you delete things. So there's your first lesson, I guess. After that, it's important to get comfortable moving in 3D space when you're, modeling or making things or whatever. So middle mouse button will orbit. The scroll wheel will zoom in and out. And then if you hold shift, the middle mouse button, you can pan. So those three, I don't know, all those tools or three functions will allow you to navigate through 3D space. You can use this thing as well. So this can be like kind of a manual way to do it, kind of a visual way, I guess you could say. Sometimes I will use it. I'll click on the different axes if I want to look at something from a particular viewpoint, like if you're modeling for games, for example, sometimes things should face a certain way down a certain axis, and this can help you with that. But otherwise, you can get away with just kind of using those three basic functions for navigating 3D space. Once you feel comfortable doing that, you can move on to selecting. So obviously for selecting object, you can click an object. You can drag and select an object. I'm just going to duplicate this object really quick. Duplicate is Shift D, and then tap Y to move it on the Y axis. And once you have three objects here, you can select them. You can hold Shift and select multiple objects. You can drag to select multiple objects, create a selection box there. You can drag to select multiple objects like that, and then hold Control to deselect one of them. So that's pretty handy. Other selection tools you can find here in this toolbar. And if you click and hold, there's a box select, circle, and lasso. So the lasso is, similar to the box, except you're drawing a shape instead of just dragging and selecting. And there's the circle, which allows you to kind of paint a selection, which is really handy. And then tweak is a little different. We'll probably kind of go over that later. But those are the basic selection tools. All right. From there, you should start moving into manipulating objects at a basic level. So the three basic types of manipulation is move, rotate, scale. So you can do those a couple different ways. So you can select an object, you can come over and select the move tool, and you can move it on a specific axis like this. Control Z obviously undoes like it does in most programs. So that's move. You can also tap G on the keyboard for the shortcut, which stands for grab, and you can kind of move it in this sort of like weird 3D kind of view. Sometimes that can be a little weird because if you look at it, let's see if I can kind of make a weird scenario. Like I could say, oh, I'm putting this above, but then it's actually back. If you want to move something on a specific axis with the keyboard shortcut, you can tap G and then tap the axis like Z, for example, and that'll snap it to the Z axis. But you can do that for all of them, which can help kind of make things a little more exact. And then we have rotate. So you can rotate the object, obviously. You have these kind of little gizmo guides to help you rotate on a specific axis. So you can do that manually like I was doing. I usually will rotate using R. So if you tap R, you can rotate in this kind of like free form rotation, which isn't really useful unless if you're trying to do something sort of random. Just like move, you can rotate on an axis. So I can tap R and Z, and I can rotate on the Z axis or any other axis. Once you finish using any of these basic tools, you have this little pop-up box down here you can pop open, and then you can sort of type the exact rotation in that you intended to do, which can also be helpful if you're trying to be more exact. You can also do that while you rotate. So for example, I want to rotate this 90 degrees on the Y. I can tap R, Y, and then 90, and it'll quickly rotate that on the 90 degrees on the Y, as you can see down here. And then last is scale. So scale can make things larger on specific axes. Like for example, this is the X or the Z. And then obviously you can make the whole thing larger, and then you can also type those values in here, just like with rotate and move. One thing about scale you have to be careful of. So let me go ahead and scale an object this way and just kind of leave it there. In Blender, if you open up this little panel here, which the shortcut is not T, N, I think, N. T is this toolbar here. You can see kind of like the transform of my current object I have selected here, or any of them. So for this one, you can see the scale set to 6.7 because I stretched it out. Scale can be tricky when you're doing things, especially when we do using like modifiers or some other kind of tools. It'll take that scale value into account when it's applying some of the functions in Blender. So just kind of be careful of that. If something is acting strange, it might be applying the scale to that. So I don't really use scale that often, unless I really have to. So what I might actually do is grab the specific faces, and we're gonna kind of go over this later, but if you move the faces out, and then you can see the scale is still 1, and you kind of have the same shape, which is good. But I guess if you do end up scaling, you can apply the transformation with Control A, and then apply scale or rotation and scale. But that's just something to think about with scale in the future. But moving on to the basics, or moving on with the basics. So I have move, rotate, scale. Let's go into select mode, which I kind of did a few seconds ago. So selecting an object, I'm going to get rid of these because they're kind of annoying. Shortcut is tab. If you're just working with like object and edit mode, you can use tab to switch between the two. And once you hit tab, or you can go up and do it here, you can manipulate the object at the, I don't know what they call it in Blender, selection modes. I think other software, like I learned how to 3D model with 3D Studio Max, and it was called subobject mode. But whatever it's called, so by default, I'm selecting the specific faces of the object, or polygons, if you will. You can also switch to vertices or edges. So for example, if I'm in vertice or vertex mode, I can select and manipulate specific vertices. I can hold shift and select 2 vertices and move them up on the Z, for example, to get this kind of like ramp effect. You can do it with edges as well. I can select an edge and move the edge. And then obviously what I did before is you can select a face and you can move a face. So this is how you kind of manipulate the objects at a granular level. That allows you to add detail and stuff into your 3D modeling. So from here, you can sort of combine the previous tools with the selection modes, and you can start to actually change the shape, which I was doing before, which can get you pretty far with modeling objects, right? So you can start to make some shapes here, but you can see I'm limited in what I can do because adding like detail and shape obviously needs more polygon data, so you have more vertices and faces to move to create whatever kind of shape that you want when you're 3D modeling. So here, I like to introduce just two really basic tools that can really help you get there pretty quick. The first one is extrude. So extrude will allow you to extrude a face from another face, I guess. So if I select the top and tap E, you can see I can extrude a new face from there. And then you keep tapping E, and you can see you can start to pull geometry out from the surface. And this is sort of the first really basic tool that you can use to start modeling shapes. All right. The next tool is, actually, let's stick with extrude, because extrude you can do other things too. So for example, I could do, I could tap E for extrude. And then before I pull up, I could tap S for scale, and that will kind of like pull the shape in. And then tap E for extrude again, and you can create shapes like that, a little bit more complicated. Now what I did with that, there's actually is a tool for that called Inset. But as you can see, like you can use these really basic tools to do a lot of stuff before you start learning all these other things. So you can take these tools pretty far with extrude. So by default, extrude will come out just straight from the face. So the direction of face is facing, or I guess a polygon is facing, to be a little less confusing, it's called a normal. And by default, extrude will just come out of that normal, whatever direction it's going. To kind of demonstrate that, I could pull this. I could pull this down to create this kind of diagonal face. And then if you extrude, you can see it comes out at that angle. Once you extrude, obviously you can tweak like how much. So by default, orientation is normal, which I was just talking about. You can switch this to global, and it'll kind of go straight up or whatever kind of way you want it to go. You can also accomplish that if you tap E for extrude, and then maybe I tap X, and I can pull it straight out like that. So there are some different ways you can use this tool. And then the second one, which is really powerful, is add edge loop. So add edge loop will add more geometry to your model. So for example, if I do, I think Control R is a shortcut, and once you do Control R, you get this little preview of this yellow line, and the preview shows up perpendicular to whatever edge you select. So if I select this vertical one, it's going to give me a perpendicular preview of the edge, 90 degrees to it. Obviously, that's what perpendicular means. So the preview is just kind of like helps you see like where the edge is going to go. So here, click, and then you can move it along the edge that you're using to sort of start the tool. And then when you click, you can apply it. And then again, you have some settings here. So you can add more cuts, or you can change some other settings here with this tool. And that's pretty much it. So that's really kind of the basics of 3D modeling. And you can take these basic tools and go really far. Like I said, you could probably model like 80% of what you need using these basic tools. It would probably take a long time and not be the most efficient way to do it. But getting comfortable doing kind of the basics and then learning new tools as you go is kind of really the best way to learn how to do this stuff. So actually, you know what? There is one more thing I did want to go over just for kind of, I guess like, so let me go ahead and make a different kind of object here. So let's do a cylinder. So for adding objects, if you go to add mesh, there's some other objects you can add. And then here, I'm going to kind of change the settings. So you can change the number of vertices, or which is like kind of the sides and the radius and depth of this object and so on. So I'm just going to keep it like this. So here's a cylinder. So as you can see with these tools, you can do some pretty, not scale, sorry. Move this kind of up. Not that much. I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of like messing around, I guess. So just kind of bear with me here. Just kind of like showing you a couple of tools in action. So you can kind of use this to kind of form the shape here. If you haven't noticed, this little orange dot here is the pivot of the object. So anything I do by default will kind of use that object as a reference. So you can see it's kind of rotating around that orange point, which you can change, which we can sort of maybe go over a little later if it gets to be a problem. But just keep that in mind. So for this object here, you can add some edge loops, right? There's another tool called Bevel, which I use pretty often. So Bevel can kind of split an edge, which can be helpful for making some of your models look a little nicer. So for example, if I wanted to make this be kind of a more interesting looking edge in Blender, if you hold Alt and click in edge mode, it'll click the whole edge around the object. It's kind of a selection shortcut. Or you could hold Shift and kind of do this, right? Or just hold Alt, click. Control B for bevel, and then you can kind of just sort of click and slide your mouse, and you can split the edge. Here again, you have some tools you could do too. And then you can do things like this, which can be helpful for 3D modeling as well. Hang on. All right. So from here, like let's say I want to extrude that end. You can kind of see kind of like how things can go. Control B. Oop, should probably do the whole thing. Control B for bevel. All these tools I'm using, like bevel, extrude, and add edge loop, you can find up here. So for example, if I got a face, I can find extrude, and an edge, I can find bevel, and loop, cut, slide. I think in Maya it was called insert edge loop, which I used to use. So that's why I call it that, but it is called loop, cut, slide. But yeah, so this is some really basic modeling, can kind of help you get started. I also encourage you to kind of think about when you're modeling, keeping everything nice and clean so you can add loops easily and have nice silhouettes for your objects, add little beveled edges and things like that. If you want to make it a little easier for yourself, you can go here and turn on auto smooth, and then right click your object and do shade smooth, and you can play with the auto smooth settings And you can see it kind of smooths the object together. I guess it does more than that, but it takes the faces and smooths the shading to get kind of a better shading result. So it can kind of increase the angle, and you can get some kind of nice shading here. And you can see where the beveled edges make a difference. So you can see the beveled edges adds this nice sort of like highlight to the edge, a nice kind of a little bit rounded edge versus like here. Well, here it just kind of like just blends it all together. But this is a little more like kind of advanced, and I'm just kind of showing you like why you might want to bevel some edges to get some nice looking shapes and things. But yeah, you can sort of like select this edge, and then if you want to like kind of go a little further, you could select that one maybe instead and do mark sharp. Then you can see now you get like a sharp edge there. This is going a little bit beyond the scope of the very first lesson, but I like to show a couple extra things for those who might kind of pick it up quickly and want to add a little bit more detail and nuance into the objects. So yeah, there it is. There's the first lesson, just driving, selecting, moving, rotating, scaling, using basic tools like extrude, edge loop, and bevel. And you can get pretty far with what you model. So that's it for this lesson. Hopefully you enjoy Blender. Blender's a great program that I think is very versatile, and it's really gaining in popularity. So these would be good skills for you to have, whatever sort of field you're looking to get into. And as we go along, each video obviously will get progressively more and adding more to it. But just kind of stick to this level for a while until you feel very comfortable. And then the other tools will kind of just feel natural as you get better in learning things. All right, so that's it. I'm going to cut the recording off and see you next time.